Okay, welcome everybody to NYCGA's panel on State of the Industry. Thank you all so much for coming out. So I'm Jason Kanter. I'm an audio director and sound designer. And I've been working freelance as a consultant for almost 2 years now.
I'm Rob. I've been doing game audio for like 20 years now, which is crazy to say out loud. Doesn't feel like it's been that long. Most famously, probably for most of you, I worked at Naughty Dog for about 11 years. Just recently got laid off from Atomic Arcade. State of the industry is a big part of it. But yeah, been doing this for a ton. Audio director, sound designer, mostly come from the post world before that. But
Hello, yes, my name is Natalie Asport. I'm currently a senior prop artist on NetherRealm Studios. Recently worked on Mortal Kombat 1. Before that, I worked at Avalanche Studios with some folks from here as an environment artist and a weapons and vehicles artist on Just Cause 3, Just Cause 4, and Contraband.
Hi, my name's Hamish Young. I've been in this industry over 25 years now. It's 27. I joined the industry as a programmer, worked at Criterion Games, working on all the Burnout games and Need for Speed. But I did both programming. I became a technical director, switched to production, became a creative producer, so done all those things. And then I came over to New York about 13, 14 years ago now, to work at Avalanche. Worked on Just Cause 3 and 4 as a designer and in the end, a game director. When Avalanche New York shut down a couple of years ago, I've been doing solo dev work. We can talk about the state of the industry.
Hey everyone, I'm Caleb. I'm an audio director / creative director at Brass Lion Entertainment, working on Wu-Tang, Rise of the Deceiver. Before that, I've worked in a bunch of different places, although I feel very young. I've only been in the industry for 18 years. But started in Boston. I'm from Boston originally, at Harmonix, working on Rock Band and Dance Central. Worked on games at EA, indie games, and also at Sledgehammer on Call of Duty, and on the recently shuttered and then unshuttered Horizon World at Meta for a time. I've done a bunch of stuff. Currently doing Wu-Tang stuff.
Right on. And I should have mentioned, I also am a former Avalanche employee. Worked with Natalie and Hamish. So since over the course of the pandemic, the industry saw a huge boom. Sales were through the roof. I had family members that had no awareness of the game industry coming up to me and congratulating me and telling me what a great job I did in selecting the game industry to work in. Brilliant. And then started around 2023, things cooled off a little bit, and we started to see some closures of studios. We saw waves of layoffs, and it's sort of been a downturn since then. As Hamish mentioned, Avalanche closed in 2024, and not my first layoff. If you work in this industry long enough, it's something you'll likely go through. I keep waiting for things to kind of turn around, because if you stay in the industry long enough, you also are aware that things are they go in cycles. There's booms and busts. And after a while, I'm starting to say wow, it hasn't turned around yet. Each closure, you're things are that's it. Now things will get better. So it started making me wonder if, is this actually a cycle or is something different now? So that's sort of where I want to kick things off. Are things different now? I don't know if we kind of keep it running. Go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, because being in the industry as long as most of us have been, you've probably seen that cycle kind of come in and out. I think we're sort of in the sine wave of everything's internal, giant internal studios. We're coming down from that. We're going back to the outsource heavy like co-development, like even more than ever before. So I think internal teams will still exist, but I think they're going to be much, much smaller than they've been over the last like 10 to 15 years. I think our power to do more independently is like greater than ever before, which I actually think is really exciting to like maybe get us out of the negative and into the positive. Like, I think indie games of like all scales, from solo devs to like AAA, it's kind of a new coin term, is kind of where a lot of the future lies, which I think is really great, actually. I don't think we necessarily need to be making, $200 million, $300 million giant AAA games as like the primary thrust of the industry. I think the excitement lies in like cultivating an audience, making a game that you're really love and really passionate about, really like energized about, and cultivating an audience that will support you. And that audience doesn't need to be 10 million people. It can be like 150,000 people that really love your game and want to support you at every like stage of that. And that might mean a different relationship that is like monetizing earlier. Like early access has been a really big thing that we've seen a lot of. But maybe even before that, it's like monetizing your milestones. It's like we make a vertical slice typically as part of our process. It's like a lot of times it's really fun and kind of great. Like I'd love to like sell that and share that and get early feedback on that and like really understand that maybe like that could be an inflection point that could influence the direction of the game. I think that's like an interesting possibility that really in the old model wasn't possible. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's a great point about vertical slices when you sort of think about it. And just to like give a little bit of background of like what a vertical slice is, if you haven't worked in a big studio before, it's like you generally want to build a sort of representative piece of that of the game that contains all the sort of core systems of that game, and often like depending on the studio, for Call of Duty, you basically build an entire level to finish quality. For other games, it may be a little bit different, but oftentimes all that work, which most of which gets changed in the final product, but all that work goes to impress like 2 or 3 people.
It's true.
Like it's like you're trying to get 2 or 3 people to say yes to sign a check for another $100 million or however much you need. And you're right, like that seems kind of a little bonkers. And it would be great to be able to get something like that into the hands of players. And I think something that's been coming up a lot for me is that for big productions, there often isn't a culture of validating choices and validating design choices along the way, and which is much, much easier to do when you're working on a small team. And you actually don't need that many people to do it to have like a representative sample. It's like 20-ish people. But starting from a position when you're working on games that like you're probably wrong, and then like being like, well, we're going to make a hypothesis and then test it. I find that like studios that are able to adopt that have generally sort of fared a little bit better in terms of having validation that they're making the right thing and that they're making something that people actually want.
Yeah, I'd agree with all the things that my fellow panelists have said. I think going back to the pandemic part of it and the kind of overinvestment that happened, both and overinvestment in individual products, like some of these live service games, $200-300 million. Ubisoft, God knows how much they spent on Skull and Bones, but it was an eye-watering amount of money. And I think that a lot of those investments went bad. And so the reason why you see this slow return, or no return in terms of that big money, is because so many groups got burnt financially from it that they're very loath to put anything like that kind of money in again. So it's what's going to happen predictably, and I think it does read to your point about how teams are going to get run. But AAA, the number, like the $1 million that AAA used to mean, how many $1 million was AAA? It went up over time as games got more expensive, and you kind of reach this kind of blockbuster peak of the Call of Duties or whatever. They hit this budget, and everyone is like, we don't want to take that risk anymore. We don't want to risk $500 million on this thing, and then it comes out, and 2 weeks later it's done, right? So you can understand everyone getting a bit gun shy about investing in new stuff right now, and I think that smaller, faster, better. That's why the AAA indies and things exist. Is that ultimately the budgets kind of have to come down. The same thing happened in the movie industry. If you remember, the peak of that kind of wild ride at the time was Waterworld, that Kevin Costner thing. It was like it was the most expensive movie ever made at that point, and it did really badly, and everyone was like, "Oh no, like we can't just spend more money on these things and they sell better, right?" So the same thing's happening with the games industry, and I think that the same thing's happening to the games industry that happened a while ago in the movie industry in terms of this fracturing of needing everyone full time in a huge Hollywood studio type situation. The big difference between us right now and that point in time in Hollywood is the quality of the unionization that exists in that process. And actually, one of the things I've kind of seen, which I think I'd love to find a way to correct, is a lot of the unionization I see is around people in the bigger companies trying to protect their rights within those big companies, and that's a completely valid thing to do. But I don't see the kind of unionization that things like the WGA represents, where everyone's a contractor. They aren't full-time employees at a big company, but you get things like healthcare and those things through those organizations. That doesn't exist for games right now.
That's Writers Guild of America, right?
Yeah. Now, to get entry to WGA, you have to have been like credited on like a script of a thing. It's quite hard to get in. But once you're in that guild, it's not just like a union. There's all sorts of things that they provide, things like healthcare and those things. And I think that kind of infrastructure for doing the kind of work that I think we're talking about, where projects are much more like people join a project and then they go and work on another project, and they're not just like working at Activision or whatever. You need that infrastructure to make that work. And I think that that's actually one of the reasons why it's not functioning well right now, is because it's very hard for folks to kind of live their lives that way. I think audio in particular has been more contract in the past than some other roles. And so maybe they feel it more keenly, but I think it's true for everyone.
Yeah, but in many cases, the path for an audio freelancer who gets a lot of work is to like form a small company, right? But there isn't. I mean, Lord knows I need healthcare right now. There isn't that safety net, right, that allows people to take risks or be able to roll on and off projects without it catastrophically destroying their lives. So yeah, totally agree.
And I guess I'll just add like all fine points. I think like I kind of like how you said the sign. I mean, that's a very audio metaphor, I think. Like I was thinking like crest and trough, but yeah, like I think it does get that pattern, and sometimes it's hard to figure out where we are, because it's not like if you zoom in on that, it's like this. It's kind of like the stock market. You have to like zoom out and see exactly what the net positive or negative impacts are. But yeah, like I think we did have like that bubble during the pandemic where it's like, oh, this is the best industry. I've also had family members who are like telling my dad like, tell Natalie she's in the greatest industry, and it's like it's interesting because like it's a very polarizing thing to say, like you're gonna have some people that know you that are like, this is the best industry, like you're doing this is like the people outside of it will say that, and then others would be like, you can't convince them that it is like you're it's a very volatile industry. But for some reason, everybody on the outside unanimously said after the pandemic or around that time, like this is games. It's movies, they're getting hit, but games you could do virtually. You could do it anywhere. But then like it definitely, a lot of studios started like expanding way too much. They started getting new offices, getting new employees, like having a separate project just because they knew that they could.
Credit was cheap.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah, and then around like what it was like 2022, 2023, you started seeing the repercussions of that bubble popping. Yep. And I still feel like we're still in that predicament. And it's weird because I'm thinking, wait, it's 2026. We're still feeling that. So it's just
Yeah,
very
but like Red
interesting.
Storm closed today. You know, like, and a bunch of people got laid off from Crystal Dynamics today. Like, yeah, so it's still rough times. All of you young people getting into it's okay.
Yeah,
it's not all doom and gloom.
It isn't, and I think that that's one of the things to say here is like we are seeing a correction, and there have been corrections in the game industry before. They do, like the industry will change. It's not going to stay the same ever. It's not going to be like it was in, the original game crash of the Atari years or whatever. But it is going to go through that cycle again. There will be an uptick. The fundamentals of this business, like how many people are spending money to buy games, it's not like we've suddenly had a huge drop in number of people playing or buying games. So the fundamentals are still there. We will see a growth over the next few years, but it will be slow and it will be painful. And, the jobs that were there in the pandemic, some of them aren't coming back. But it's also true that this is still an incredibly vibrant industry with an awful lot of great people who make great products that are successful. Hits still exist. Slay the Spire 2, God knows, is still on early access and it's sold like 5 million copies already. It's wild. So those opportunities exist. It's just, like a lot of traditional structured companies have gone through a really hard time.
But that being said, sort of like looking back on like all of us who've been doing this for quite a while, when we started out, you had to be sort of a little bit crazy or like a little bit, really passionate about this medium to work in games. When I think about sort of all the games that I've made over the course of my career, I'm like, oh man, why do I do this? This is like, I could have like a normal job and like not have my mom pestering me constantly. I love you, Mom. About like, is this gonna go away? Like, are you secure? But it's that same ethos, right? Like, I wouldn't have it any other way because like I love this medium so much, and I think that everybody who's coming in, like, it's maybe not if you're like looking at like, well, what's the best job for me to get to like have the best prospects right now? Right now, might not be games, but if you really love games, then it's what you got to do.
Yeah, my brother became a banker, and he is financially secure in a way that I'm not. If you want to be financially secure, then there are other jobs.
Yeah, like you said about passion and everything, you also have to have like a skin to weather the conditions. Like, I mean, it's in every industry, but I think this one and any like creative field, it really hits home because you're like artistically and creatively passionate, and that could cause us to get like hurt because we're like putting all of our heart and soul into these games and these projects. But
I do want to add a little context. So 20 years ago, when I was first looking for my first job, there was 0 job posts for entry-level sound design, anything. If you go on LinkedIn right now, you will find dozens of job posts for various levels of sound, anything, composing, music, sound design. That is already an improvement, and even in this down period, like there's still a lot of jobs that are available, which I think is awesome. It just means there's a lot more competition now too, but the jobs are there. And as Hamish was saying, like the projects are not necessarily going away. Like there's plenty of money out there to make games. Like people want to play games. I think it's just the form in which those games take and the sizes of teams are the things that are going to be different. It may be we go from sort of the specialist roles we've had now, where you have like sound designer, you have technical sound designer, you have composer, and you need to be more generalist. That generalist sort of ability to kind of fill multiple roles, wear multiple hats, I really think is going to be a industry need and want, and may like set you apart in some ways than it has previously. Doesn't mean being specialized, being like t-shirt shaped isn't really helpful. That for those of you who don't know, t-shirt like lots of skills, but one really deep one. That one, that's like Valve loves those types of folks. But that is something to like consider is like get outside of what you are really deep in and start playing in those other areas. For me, like education-wise, like going to SCAD, like getting to learn about modeling and level design and texturing, like has helped me immensely over my career. Not just like because I do those things, I don't. But having those conversations with people, being able to collaborate with people, it's like extremely important to understand how to talk to somebody to like better work with somebody who's doing modeling or environment art or level design. So I encourage you all to like broaden your skills outside of your specific kind of discipline.
So you mentioned, that's an interesting transition. For a while, it seemed like it was going in the other direction, where I was seeing more specialists, at least within the audio department, where suddenly you see vocal designers and all these different specialties that didn't exist before. And, Hamish had mentioned the Hollywood model, and it seemed like it was kind of following that Hollywood model where, back in the 70s and 80s, it was if you had a team of more than like a half dozen people on making a movie for audio, that was a lot. But now it's just like dozens and dozens of people involved, and they all have a very specific specialty. So do you see it going in the other direction where we're going to veer away from specialty and it's going to be more generalist because they'll have more power, say, due to AI? Or are we going to continue to need specialists in the way we have?
I think I think because we're in this part of the pendulum swing that is leading to smaller internal teams, I think that being a generalist is really important right now. And like, I'm sorry, because like for the past 4 or 5 years, the narrative has been like, no, you got to specialize. We need technical sound designers. And like, I mean, I'm a technical sound designer. Big up the technical sound designers. And like, folks who only focus on dialogue. And I think that as internal teams get smaller, it's just more and more important to like understand and be fluent in kind of all aspects of sound design. And really like the most important thing to like pivot slightly, if I'm sort of being like, what's the most important skill to like get hired and succeed inside of a audio department? It's like curiosity, right? It's like, as you mentioned, Rob, like learning from the engineers that you work with, digging in with them and being like, hey, like can you teach me a little bit about how to code my own audio hookups? Could you teach me like VFX artists? It turns out VFX and audio are like exactly the same. Like it's all just curves over time. It is literally the exact same stuff. But like learn it, like you want a tight relationship with VFX artists and you want to learn about those things. Because like now you can pump like RTPCs into Niagara and do all sorts of stuff.
It's like the bassist and the drummer, right?
Yeah,
they
exactly.
Kind of need
the
to
rhythm
play,
section,
yeah.
And yeah, just like going around and learning at any time that there's a black box in a game that you're working on, that's a bad thing. Like anytime you can like make a black box like was it clear rather than opaque? That will make you a better sound designer because it gives you more hooks to get into. I got my start in sound design circuit bending stuff and making Maximus P patches. And it's just like circuit bending, right? Like being a sound designer in games is like circuit bending because you're just taking your alligator clips and you're like, there's a number, I could use that for my own nefarious purposes. And you're just like finding different numbers that move through the game and figuring out how you can use them for what you want to do. So just like learning and being really general is like, I think the key right now.
I think there's another aspect to that I think is really important that I found throughout my career has been wonderful. So with VFX artists in particular, understanding their workflow and how they implement audio cues into visual effects, you can help take some work off their plate, which helps them out. They're very small teams or very small teams. Like from a human being level, like being able to help each other is really great because it builds relationships. And ultimately, being on a team is building relationships. You want to build a thing together, you want to collaborate. Like, being able to help each other is wonderful, and people remember that. And then they want to help you out, and they want to figure out how to take work off your plate. And it can really create this like wonderful environment to like be creative, where you're all like pulling the rope in the same direction. Something I like to say a lot. Like, that is something that I found in my career has always been a boon and never a detriment. Like, anytime you're learning about somebody else's craft, it get curiosity. It allows them to have a little curiosity about your craft, and the more we can share with people, it builds empathy. And empathy is like absolutely critical when you're building these things, because they can be very hard to build.
Natalie, so in the art department, have you come across this generalist versus specialist?
Yeah, I was thinking like in the grand scheme of like games, I feel like we're an industry where you really have to be a generalist, but you have to specialize. And like, especially in the art department, like it varies in different projects and different teams, like different studios and stuff. But I find like, even from working at Avalanche to working at NetherRealm Studios, I still need to know rigging. I still need to know animation. I still need to know how to open up files in softwares that I'm not primarily doing 3D modeling in, because the animators are going to be using that file, and I need to make sure that my model can open up in those files. So like there's a huge overlap, and it just, I think that's because that's what a game is. It's non-linear. It's like a spider's web, and if you're like trying to be in this linear thinking of like, okay, I'm just going to focus on one aspect of the creation process, the one that, let's say, is my discipline or my title, then you don't know what part of the spider web you're on, really. And, it's just like, I find that more in the film side is when you'll find people who are very specialized. Like, I know people who only do hair and fur systems, and they don't know how to model, but they'll make the fur on a Yeti look really fantastic. But in games, it's like, usually like there's a character artist who's worked on the fur, on the hair cards. They've worked on even the rig. They've worked on with the animators to figure out like how the concept is going to be pulled off. So it's just, from my perspective with art, it's like the visual art. It seems like you're not so much in the specialized sense. But that, again, could depend on studios. Like, I feel like maybe in like Call of Duty, you'll have like a specific like weapons artist, but still, I think you're still working on some of the rigs and probably the animation for it.
Yeah, I think, as everyone's saying, I think everything you can know is helpful. I'm learning Blender right now because I'm doing solo dev work, and so that's
so cool to hear.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the one thing that I didn't know how to do was art, so I'm learning that as we go. But yeah, I think it's all really valuable stuff. It gives you more insight. It makes you a better collaborator. It opens up more communicator. It opens up more jobs for you because there's more things that fit what you can do. It means that you can do things like solo dev more easily and those things because you have a wider set of skills. I think the specialism is good, but I think specialism requires scale. And that scale, like the reason why, somebody can be just a fur person, not a furry, but in the visual arts, in movies, is because there's enough need for that one job across the board for somebody to be able to specialize that way. We're not really in that phase right now in the games industry. I think, as we mentioned, I think we're going to see a lot more games get made, but smaller. There's still going to be tentpole games, obviously, but really, I was talking to someone who worked at Rockstar, and they were like in charge of the back half of the horse in terms of like the animating of the horses in Red Dead, and you're like, oh god, like you spent 4 years doing just that. I mean, it's so, it's actually more fun for people to have more variety in your role, right? It's more fun to work and collaborate with a wider group of people. Games are a place where you can enjoy the kind of creative work that you do. And I think that anytime you can maximize that, it improves your ability to get jobs. It improves your ability to have fun when you're having when you do have a job. And I just think it is super valuable. And I highly recommend anyone to get curious, see what they want to try something out. Like I'm learning Blender slowly and poorly, but it's something I'm trying to do. So yeah, don't be afraid to suck at it. I think it's the what I would advise.
So the budget has come up a few times, and team size. So, and obviously there's going to be some kind of correlation there. Do you all see budgets having plateaued, and are team sizes being reduced? They're getting
budgets
smaller.
Are smaller. Yeah, yeah. I think GTA obviously has got more budget than anyone can imagine, but
That's where it all went.
yeah. But in general, yeah, you'll see budgets come down, and I don't think this isn't because of AI or anything. Like it's just the scale of the projects. They got too big. There wasn't a big enough audience to cope with the cost of making these things, and that's what happened to Waterworld. There weren't enough people going to the cinema to support the fact that even if that movie was good, it wasn't going to make its money back.
I always thought it was because it was a bad movie. But
It is because it was a bad movie, but you know what I mean.
You take that back.
Great stunt show, though. Great stunt show.
I think that gradually teams are getting smaller. You're gonna have like a core team, and there's gonna be a lot of outsourcing. It's just logistics, I guess, works better. I think like me personally, I like to build a relationship with the team that I work with, and to know like we're gonna get an outsourcer, and then they're gone in 3 months, and then like for me, I would have to like ramp them up, and they finally got like they understand the technical aspect of the pipeline. Then you realize like they're really good artists, and they also are good they're receptive to feedback, and then or maybe they weren't, and finally you build it, and it's fantastic. They're producing great work, you're producing great work, you're a kick-ass team, and then they're like, okay, we don't need this outsourcer anymore. We're gonna get another one in 3 months. Can we just bring the other one back? No. And like that is I think that's where we are. But luckily, like it depends on the studio. But I did have like, because I work under NetherRealm, we work under WB. So WB has multiple game studios. So we get like WB Montreal artists instead of getting outsourcers. So in a way, like that's really great because they're like, they'll go, but they're not really gone. And then we'll see if we can, if let's say I'm working with the prop team, and in 5 months we're gonna have a huge backlog of assets that we need to get through. We need extra hands. We're not gonna hire someone. We're gonna try to get someone else outside the team. No outsourcers. Okay, let's see what WB Montreal's up to, and we can sort of request that artist again. So I don't know if off the top of my head, like what studios have where they're like they have sister studios under their parent company, but to me, like as from where I'm standing, like that is like the best predicament if game studios are going that way, where they're just gonna stay small, because otherwise, like, yeah, it seems like it's just outsourcers are dominating. Like even at one point, I remember telling students like, just try to get hired at an outsourcing company. If anything, you get to work with so many different studios, and you'll build a rapport with so many other teams. If you're the one communicating, or just in general, if your work's really great, we're gonna like want to know your name, and you might have a leg up and getting hired into those studios later on if you like applied.
Yeah, it's not really the case that like this isn't what we want to do, right? I think that as you said, Hamish, like budgets are small right now. It's like they kind of max out at like $7 to $10 million is like kind of the bet that people are willing to take. And so you're there and you're like, well, we have this much budget. And you feel trapped because you know in your heart of hearts that in order for your game to succeed, it needs to be like a lot of game, you know? And then you're like, well, we need to make a lot of game so people feel like they get their value, and that, you know, we won't be like completely review bombed or something like that. And then you're like, okay, well, we need to make this much game and we have this much money. How do we do it? And that's where you're like, well, even U.S. employees versus Canadian employees, like U.S. employees are like twice what it costs to hire somebody, to like employ somebody in Canada because of healthcare and stuff like that. And then you look at like an outsourced company, maybe overseas, right? You can get more video game into your video game for less money of this very limited budget. So it's just like, it, on the face of it, it can seem like, well, everybody wants to outsource. It's like, no, we don't. Like, no, people don't. I would love to have like a nice internal team with enough time and budget to make the like what feels like the right amount of video game, and we can all feel really proud of it. But like, you're stuck. So yeah, it's a really tough predicament. But I don't think people are really happy about the decisions that you need to make what feels like enough.
Is that something that feels like it's a permanent change now? Like it's just, there's no turning back. There's just going to be more and more outsourcing?
Maybe I can jump on that. I think talking about it like co-dev and outsourcing and those things, I think are not quite the way that we're going to think about it in the future. So like outsourcing right now is kind of this, let's go pick a company that's kind of somewhere else and we'll just kind of spec everything up for them and then they'll just kind of make it and then we'll review it. And if it's good, we'll accept it. And it's very transactional in that sense. They're not really part of the creative environment. And I think that there is a place for that, but I don't think it grows with the number of like teams or the downscaling of a core like creative team or whatever. I think you'll see collaboration, creative collaboration, just be broken out from being like a full-time permanent employee job. I think you're going to see more contractors, but I don't think that you see that as outsourcing. You're still going to want those people to be part of that creative expression. You're still going to have people whose job it is to build those outsourced packets to send to an outsourcer to get stuff and come back. But generally, yeah, you want the group of people to come together, like in a movie. You know, like when you have a production team in a movie, and they, you know, you get your art director and your audio director and all those things. They're not like they're there for that project, and then they go do another project, right? And going back to that thing is like you suddenly want to do a sequel, and maybe that guy isn't available anymore because now he's doing something else. You know, that's kind of bad planning. That's kind of one of the things that as a producer you have to think about of like, well, if this goes well, do we want to kind of hold on to this group of people, whatever, and kind of book their time and all that stuff. I think credits are going to get more important. And I think up until now, game credits have been a topic that is being fractious because not everyone's been credited correctly. But at the same time, the value of being on the credit has not been so big because, frankly, when somebody says, I worked on this game, I'm not going to go to the game and go, well, I don't see you in the credits. But if you get more into this kind of contractor economy, I think getting credits is going to be more important into those things, especially if there is something like the WGA where, you know, you get entry because you're credited on a big thing or an important thing. So yeah, I think that I don't see us like having more outsourcing, and if anything, I would say that the AI revolution that happens might put pay to a bunch of outsourcing more than it puts pay to anything else. Like the jobs that are most insecure in that thing is when you go, I want to go and get a lamppost made, and you go to somewhere in Thailand and somebody makes you a lamppost, and you're like, cool, because I don't really care about it. I just care about having a lamppost. And audio folks have fixed this a long time ago by actually having libraries of audio things. God forbid we have that for our assets and those things. Although Fab is changing that. I think, yeah, so I do think that that's actually where some of the jobs may go is in, like, if you're willing to spend not very much money on outsourcing to make your money go further, then that's maybe where you end up in an AI situation. But yeah, I think that the core teams still are going to have to do that creative work, and I don't think that all goes to outsourcing. It can't.
And just to speak to like sort of the, is this a permanent change kind of thing? I think it's impossible to really predict because the industry is cyclical, but it's different every time. It's not the same, but it also will change. It inevitably will change, especially with AI. Like that is such a wild west right now, and how it will affect what we do is still sort of up in the air. I see a lot of like really great busy work being eliminated. That's really fantastic. But there's certain things about creative work which I don't necessarily believe will be completely replaced. Like similar search is really actually fantastic because when you have 30 terabytes of sound effects, speaking of libraries, and you want to find something new or different, it's actually really great for that because going through manually and listening is not effective use of your time.
It's not scalable.
Not scalable, not a good use of your time. But having a tool that can help you unlock some of those files that have been sitting on your hard drive for 10 years that you've never touched, that's kind of great. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a permanent change. I'm sure the budget will creep up once again because if I know one thing about making games is that more efficient doesn't mean like it's cheaper or that it takes less time. It just means we try to shove more stuff into all the games. We will fill the space that is created by whatever efficiencies we make, inevitably.
Good point.
So, Hamish, I believe you mentioned that that it's not as if people are going to stop playing games. There's still an audience out there, but it raises sort of one of the things I want to ask you all. So I know that this has come up in other meetings I've had with people where now it's not so much competition for dollars, it's competition for eyeballs because there are so many other different forms of entertainment that especially like the younger generation is ingesting now. So rather than play a game, a kid might just scroll on TikTok or
So I think this is it's true, but it's also a bit of a misunderstanding. Like going back to being old, the first game I worked on, we had, it was a AAA game, right? We had 15 people on that team, right? The first Burnout game was 15 people.
It's amazing.
And it was a hobby, right? It was a hobby situation where not everyone was into video games, right? It wasn't a dominant media landscape or whatever. And that hobby has grown, and more people are part of that hobby. And it's also become part of the broader media landscape. People know, like, video games. People are expected to culturally know video games in a way they never used to, like 20 years ago.
True.
It's part of the cultural discussion. So I think the idea that suddenly, because I know TikTok's popular, that suddenly that means this hobby is completely invalidated is just a crazy situation. And the only teams that care about really competing with TikTok are your Fortnites and Robloxes and those things, because they're platforms, they're not really games in that sense, right? They're things that people come back to over and over and over again. Those kind of big live service hits are more like a social media than they are like games. Because people go there to hang out with their friends and be social, and that's why they come back every time, right? It's not because it's a better game each time.
Sure.
It's because it's where they hang out. So I think you've got to make a big distinction between the kind of social media games and games as a hobby, because I think that difference is important.
Fair enough.
I think there's a really big opportunity for smaller, shorter games. We, as an industry, got really obsessed with 30 hours as some benchmark amount of time that provided value for $60 or now $70. As we've gotten older, and really as attention span is robbed by other things, like, to me, having a 2-hour game, a 4-hour game is something really great. If it's got a lot of content. I mean, one of my favorite games of all time is Journey. It's like 2 hours to finish Journey. It's a fantastic game, worth every dime that you paid for it. And I feel like there's an opportunity for those shorter, smaller games to get that attention. It doesn't need to be $70. It fits into what is a struggle for a lot of folks, like to spend leisure money on things. I think there's an opportunity there, and smaller team sizes. I think possibly people like get the misunderstanding that you can't make something high quality with 15 people, but clearly you could. And I think now, absolutely, with the new tools that we have available to us, there's no reason why you still can do that stuff. So I don't want folks to be obsessed with, the rock stars and the Naughty Dogs, because that's James Cameron. If you're talking about the movie analogy, not everyone's James Cameron. Markiplier just made a really great movie that made a lot of money for a lot less money that he put in, and a very, very small crew. So it's one of those things that I think we as an industry need to just look in these other directions. Stop looking in the light where everyone was going. There's a lot of opportunity to make things that are different.
And I will be the devil's advocate here. I think if we go in the direction where we're making longer games, and I'm also going to agree with what everyone said, if we stay in that direction of making longer games, before, I remember when I talked to people, what are your new games, or how are you playing games? And usually they're like, I want to, but I just don't have the time. I do think that it's getting to a point where it's not that, it's attention span. And I will say, even though I'm not the younger generation, I also realize my attention span is shortening. And I think it's partially what these social media platforms are doing. They're really making us feel like we would need that quick dopamine hit. And before that, I didn't want to spend 30 hours playing a game. And then on top of I don't have the time to leave it and then come back in a week or a month and remember all the controls, so I can't play it. I'm going to bookmark it. But then now it's okay, attention span. And one of my favorite games is Limbo, and that one you could finish in 3 hours. And weirdly enough, I've played that 3 times, and I could have beat a more robust, lengthier game, but I didn't. So I do think that people are going back to older games because they are shorter, and it's not. I don't think it's any of us making the decisions to make 30-hour games. It's the business people up top. But I think if only they would maybe hear us. Maybe they'll hear us. But I think more content. What is it better quality? It's more packed, less quality, less quality over quantity. Quality over quantity.
Quality
Yes.
over quantity.
I think that's the main thing, because I don't think anybody's explicitly going to TikTok or these reels because they find it amazing. I think it's designed to keep your attention, and if we could get more smaller games in maybe 3 to 5 hours, I think we will get them all back.
That's a really good point. What challenges are you guys facing now that you weren't facing maybe 3 years ago?
I can talk a little bit about that. So I think that one of the challenges with this flood of people being made redundant, especially in the US, is that when jobs do open up, there's actually a flood problem of people applying. When Avalanche opened up a gameplay programmer role, or I think a few years ago, and this was before the redundancies really got heavy. I think we had 200 applicants for that one role. And it was wild to see then. I think it's got worse now, and I think that just the amount of talent that's kind of inverted commas swilling around is really high, and that makes it hard for anyone to kind of break through that noise, even established people, because once again, if you have hundreds or thousands of applications for any given job, that requires so much work even to filter through, let alone find the best person for it.
True.
So I do think that that is where networking and other things actually do become powerful, because I think just in a wall of of stuff, like being able to kind of talk to people and know who they are and those things, I think is super important. I would highly recommend anyone here who doesn't go to the IGDA New York chapter stuff to go there as well. And NYU often put on a bunch of stuff as well. I think all of those opportunities are great opportunities to meet people and kind of widen your networks, and I definitely would highly recommend that. It's a small industry. But yeah, I think that the number of people now kind of either doing their own thing or on the hunt for a job is so high that I think that is causing a short-term change in how people approach stuff. But that's my 2 cents worth.
The phrase "do more with less" is a very challenging thing, because though our tools are getting better and faster and more efficient, expectations are rising along with those things. And so it's really difficult to do more with less, less budget, less people. That means a lot of things. The ways to navigate that stuff, it's seemingly becoming a salesman for why you need to justify the things that you need. I think that is like a skill that is able to be cultivated to sort of like circumvent the opinion of people who don't necessarily understand the discipline and can't necessarily, fathom why you would need X dollars or X folks to come help you. So that's a challenge that I think, especially because people see AI and they go, well, that must make things easier, right? Because they don't necessarily understand how it applies to your...
It's magic.
It's magic. It's a black box. Don't necessarily understand how it applies directly to what your work is, but it must make it faster. And I think we're just sort of in that time of technology where it's not well defined how that helps us.
It's a situationship phase.
It's definitely a situationship, yes.
Yeah, I think for me it's sort of like a game-specific problem in terms of sound design is figuring out density and figuring out sort of like what is the appropriate level of coverage for every system, and how much sound design is too much. I'm sort of in like a more sort of mixing mode, and like trying to I'm just like taking away, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we invested so much in all this stuff, and I'm like just turning it down, and yeah, trying to figure out like, okay, like how do we invest our time into stuff that has the highest impact, especially our game is very music forward, and that just is like it is beautiful, but it destroys everything. But yeah, and then trying to keep up with tooling and make tooling better. That is somewhere where I've like had a good amount of success personally, like building AI tools. Just be like, hey Claude, how do you know about Wappy Script? And it's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And like, yeah, just building scripts and internal tools. But the biggest challenge I've found is like getting tools that I built for myself to a point where they're useful for the rest of the team. I've found is really hard. And that's not really a nut that I've cracked yet.
That's why it's great being a solo dev. You just deploy it to yourself and you're done. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I do think it's probably important to talk about AI a little bit. It's very controversial for a number of reasons, rightfully so, in the way it's sort of been constructed. However, it's inevitable at some level. And I would urge you to not have a prejudice against it to where it is a detriment to your career development, because though it's been built in this unethical way that I kind of hate, I also see that there are things like building tools for yourself that actually is really fantastic that you wouldn't have really any other way. And so there is sort of a battle between the morality of how it's been built and the utility that it does indeed possess. So I encourage you to look into it, to play with it where you can. Don't just write it off because of sort of the messiness that is the current state of it. I do encourage you to kind of look into it because it's not going away. And it's better to try to find a way to use it or a tool that fills your needs than to completely ignore it.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, which is if the answer to the question is AI, then I think you have to really think about are you asking the right question? Because I meet a lot of tech bros, and they're very much like, yes, AI can do everything, and you're like, have you used any of this stuff? I've not had that experience, and it's very good at some things. The current LLM technology was built to translate between languages. That's what the technology was built for. The transformer technology was built to translate between languages. It is good at translating between languages. So it's good at that. It's also good at interpolating things. So it's good at taking all this data and finding something that is similar to what you've done before, which is why the search works really well, because it's good at finding things that are similar. That is terrible for creativity. It's great for, kind of doing stuff that it's seen a million times before. The AI, the in word for this kind of thing is something called in distribution, which means that the AI model has statistics on the thing you're asking about it, right? So it's in distribution. You have that thing. Anything that's out of distribution, i.e. it hasn't had enough training data on, it does some wild stuff. So it is very brittle. It's not very reliable. And the only reason why these big companies are spending unbelievable amounts of money in taking everyone's water and electricity is because they believe if they build it big enough, that brittleness will go away because now everything is in distribution. And I think that actually that is a mistake because I don't think that's fundamentally possible. And there's just not going to be enough power and water to make that happen. They're going to try. God knows they're going to try. But I don't think it's going to be successful. So when you think about AI, right, it isn't a panacea. It's not going to fix everything. But is it useful? In limited situations, it may be useful. But if the answer is AI before you've asked the question, then actually, no, don't go there. But if you're doing something that you feel is something that has been done a billion times before, and you want a variant of that thing that's been done a billion times before, cool, right? Build a tool that, somebody's gone through everyone's scripts and has seen that 1,000 billion times, and so it can spit out a script for you, great. That's what it's good at. So it commoditizes things that are kind of common, right? So when you're thinking about that for your job, creative industries rarely deal in that much common stuff, and where they do, it's mainly tooling. It's not going to make interesting choices. It's not going to do anything actually very fun or creative. It's not going to make something fun. It's going to give you the most boring answer it can. If it's in and then it gives you wild things if it's out of distribution. So use it, but you've got to be really aware of what it is. And most people treat it like magic. They think it's like, oh, it can do anything. And it's like, well, no, it's some math. And you just present it with a bunch of stuff, and it has some statistics on that stuff. It really is all it does.
Yeah, but it can help you make sure that your reverb sends are correct for the one that you forgot to click, and save you a bunch of time that way.
Absolutely, right? Good tools, right?
Yeah, I think the way you put it is perfect. So I'm not going to add on to it there, but as from a 3D modeler, visual artist perspective, yeah, no. I mean, I do other things. I also do audio and I do writing, and I could see its use cases there's so many. But especially if you're a student, you're breaking in, you're trying to create your portfolio. Nothing gets me more upset than going to Google and typing in gorilla, and it's the first several columns and rows are AI. I could instantly tell. And if I show it to artists who've been working in the industry or been working professionally for 20 years or 15 years or 10 years, they could tell. 5 years, some might have a little difficulty trying to figure out which is which. And if you're, I see there's this problem, you could just see the generations of new artists who are just going to be thinking that they know what a gorilla looks like or a lion looks like, and then they didn't know, maybe a gorilla has a certain molar or something, and they spent this amount of time. It's just really weird to see that students are going to off the bat have anatomy wrong on maybe a creature that they're trying to make their portfolio, and maybe they're going to spend 6 months looking at all these AI images. And I've even gotten tricked. And, you know, like, I think Google now has like an AI feature where it's like if it's an AI generated photo or image, you could turn it off. But it's just so critical for a student or for those who are trying to learn what real world reference looks like, and they're getting confused on what's real and what's not. So I urge students and anyone who's trying to get into visual art, or they're like doing anatomy studies or lighting studies, make sure that there's no AI tag on it. And if it looks off, you know, maybe show it to another, like someone with a more like keen eye. Because the truth is, if you upload it to any of these AI engines and say, is this AI? It's going to say no. Or it's not. It's going to kind of beat around the bush and gaslight you and say, oh, this looks like it was uploaded by someone in PhotoBucket. And the thing is, you could go there and they might not have the tag either, but you know. So like, I could probably go on about AI. Like, it's a very nuanced thing. Like, I get it. It's used for tools and it's good for efficiency, but that's an umbrella term too. Like, I really wish we would, instead of saying just AI, say like prompt machine learning tools or prompt generated something. And for us, it's like prompt generated art, visual images, imagery, and AI generated motion graphics. Like, to me, like, that's, if you're trying to use that for your portfolio in any way, I would say use it if it's there and it's like in your way and you grab it and you're like, okay, I'm going to put it in my reference file. That's fine. Like, if you're doing like R&D, but do not like incorporate it anywhere else. I hate to be like, do not do this, but I feel like there's so much noise, and it's just...
Well, I mean,
you know.
in some senses, like, a lot of big games companies, like, they ban using AI-generated imagery for two main reasons, right? One is legally, it's not copyrightable, it's public domain. So, you know, them's the breaks. And it's also the kind of the equivalent of, you know, stealing someone's art in the sense of, like, you don't own it. So, you know, there's real issues around that. Now, in Europe, which is different from the US, legally, if you own all of the data that you train the model with, then technically you can own the output. But that's not true in the US. Even if you own all the data, the output is not copyrightable. So just be aware of that too.
And just like, as a collaborator, if you're a sound designer and you're working with artists and it's all about building relationships, right? Nothing will skunk a relationship with an artist than being like, make it like this, and then sending them AI art. Because I think as sound designers, we're like a little bit more lucky, and we're like a little bit protected for now from AI-generated assets feeling really existential, because it does for visual artists, especially concept artists. It really does for voice actors. And so you need to be sensitive about that when you're collaborating, and like just do an extra check if you're like contributing to a reference board or something like that, or like ask your artist friend of like, I found this, I think it's cool, but it might be like, I can't really tell. And then you're also putting trust in your artist friend to be like, you have the expert eye that can tell, will you teach me? But yeah, it's really, really important in a collaborative environment to be really sensitive about that. And yeah, just take an extra step to check. So like, great advice.
Yeah, no, if you came up to me and like, is this AI? And just, Oh, I think so. That has 7 fingers.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks for checking.
I do think, like, you know, maybe I've sounded quite positive about AI. I don't know if I sounded that way, but I mean, like, for example, the DLSS 5 stuff that's come out recently, they have not been very truthful about that whole thing. They're like, oh, it's not, you know, it's representing the geometry that's underneath and the textures that are underneath and all these things. And you're like, it just takes a picture in the motion vectors and then generates a new picture. In what way is that representing the stuff underneath it? It doesn't even know what is underneath it. And I think that opens up a whole bunch of, you know, there are a bunch of huge ethical situations. My wife is a published author, and she's had to fill in all these forms to get compensation from the Claude thing because they stole everyone's novels to train the thing. It's complicated. Ethically, it's complicated. And the outcome in the case of DLSS 5 appears to be that it has got in the way of the artistic intent of the games, even if, you know, the CEOs and the EPs on those games go, no, it's fine, right? I do think we have to be very, very careful. And while I think the technology itself fundamentally isn't good or bad, like it is a technology, and you should be thinking about, is this, you know, when you have a problem, is there something that this could help with? At the same time, it can be used absolutely for bad, and it can be made bad in like how you go build it. And I think you've got to be very, very careful about that. And to the point that Natalie was making about your portfolio and all those things, if I see an artist and I see some of their portfolio is AI generated, they're not getting the job.
No, never.
Right? If I, you know, that's not, you know, and audio may be a little bit more protected, maybe, but still, if a bunch of the audio that I listen to is, you know, music generated or sound effect generated, they're not getting the job, because they don't know the line between their own work and something that they've just prompted. So.
Even more critical, why it's good to post breakdowns of your models and your art. Before, the whole AI generated art thing, that was important, but even now, because I did have a situation where I saw someone's portfolio and it looked like AI. And luckily they were able to show me their other renders and stuff. But it just goes to show we're like all in the state of like, do we trust? Like, we can't trust. It's a weird time for sure.
So I wanted to open up the questions for the audience in case, I don't know if any of you have any questions for. Yes, Kate, go ahead.
I actually had a question specifically about like New York audio. I know New York is not like a concentrated game city in the way that a lot of other places are. So as people who I'm assuming live and work from New York, I guess how have you seen the industry here trending from like where it was and maybe where it's going, and how do you guys find work and opportunities in a place where it's not so populous and centralized?
I mean, what Natalie does most of the time is kind of what a lot of people do, which is they live and work in New York, but they work remotely to whatever gig that is, whether it's a full-time gig or other things. I think with audio, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. Voice actors traditionally, like I know a voice actor who put in was it ISDN line or whatever to try and be able to like do voice acting over the old internet. So yeah, I think that reality is that's true. There's lots of indies in New York as well, but generally, just in the grand scheme of things, the work happens all over the world, and so yeah, I think you embrace that.
So I was having a conversation about exactly this for audio folks. I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic was a lot of audio folks, like, we figured out our home setups. We got really comfortable working on less ideal, less treated, perfect rooms. We've, invested into our setups, speakers, headphones, amps, and that's a superpower.
Noise damping.
It's a superpower because you can work anywhere, and New York and really the East Coast. I'm in New Jersey, so is really great time zone wise for working with European companies. You share a lot more hours with time zones there. You can also work with the West Coast very easily as well. So it's actually a really great place. And as we are going and transitioning into this more outsourcer, co-dev sort of space, I think it's going to be a really great place to be. At least that's, just my opinion. And having conversations, it saves money because studios don't need to build rooms. If they want to have a home base, a studio, it's not cheap to build these rooms, right? And if you can hire somebody who has an ability to work well and their output is really great, that's a pretty compelling, way to hire people.
Yeah, and like Hamish said, I work remotely, but I'm not doing audio, so I got my rig and I'm working mainly on 3D modeling and visual art. So I have a tablet and everything, but it's very interesting because I think my company's when I started at NetherRealm 3 years ago, and at the time they were looking. It was still remote work was still a very much. It was a current thing where game studios were starting to hire 100% remote folks and not expecting them to eventually relocate. And then shortly after, it was okay, we're not hiring any more remote, just local. And then now it's back to we're hiring remote people and they don't have to come in. So it's interesting. I think it depends on the cycle of the project, but overall it is fairly cheaper to you don't have to. It's you don't have to worry about making space for other employees. They could just work from their home office, send them a rig, and it's an investment, but it sort of pays off. On one end, I do miss being in an office and being amongst my fellow team, but to me, it's also cost effective as well. You don't have to go in and you don't have to commute. So yeah.
I actually have a sort of follow-on question that could maybe help a little bit because I'm a relatively recent transplant. I'm moved from Cali, at Brass Lion. What would you consider to be especially for the New York indie scene, geographically sort of the beating heart of the city? Is it NYU Game Center? Is it sort of IGDA? I know there's some indie meetups that happen.
Yeah, so Gumbo, which is in Dumbo, is a collective workspace for indies, and that's obviously on the Brooklyn side, and then you have NYU there. I think a lot of meetups happen either on the Brooklyn side or in Manhattan, just because it's the easiest place for everyone to get to, including the New Jersey folks. So I think that often meetups happen in Manhattan, but a lot of kind of indie scene stuff happens in Brooklyn. It's kind of generally nothing really happens in Staten Island, just in general.
Except the Wu-Tang Clan.
Except the Wu-Tang Clan. And what we do in the shadows. But yeah, and Long Island, they've the Rockstar motion capture space is there, so there's all sorts of things all over the place. But I would argue, the main centers are kind of Brooklyn for actual indie game dev, but then Manhattan is a kind of meetup place.
Yeah. And then I guess also Wonderville, right?
Yeah,
there's Wonderville as well. Yeah,
I love that place.
And unfortunately, a few places have closed recently as well. The place that playcrafting used to happen in is unfortunately closed. So they've now moved it to OS NYC, but spaces like this are great as well. I was just saying that maybe you should get some more IGGA folks coming here as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good point you mentioned about NYU Game Center. I forgot to mention I also teach at NYU Game Center as a 3D modeling for games instructor. But they do monthly lectures. It's called the lecture series. It's monthly talks where they bring in someone from the game industry, all different. I believe they've had a couple audio-centric talks, and just recently they had Bennett Foddy talking about his games. That's a really good, I guess, NY Game Center is a school, but like it's also a good organization to follow, and you can play indie games and play games that are currently being made by students. So that's really cool. Another one is Brookland. It's actually a bar.
Coast.
That is that the one you're talking
Yeah,
about?
that closed, unfortunately.
I live a block from there. I
Yeah.
did not know.
Yeah.
This is how much my head's been under the ground. Oh my God. They helped me save a pigeon once. Oh no.
Sorry.
So Caleb, you work for Breastline, and you're based in, is it Rockland County or Westchester?
Westchester.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do you have an actual studio that you work in, or do
I
you
work in
from
my
home?
basement.
Okay.
Yeah. If you saw me scuttling down the stairs, that's how I get to work every morning. Yeah. So
You need to put a slide in now.
yeah, it's interesting. Sort of when we first started the studio, I'm like employee number 2.
Oh, wow.
The plan was to actually have like a studio in Harlem, and the pandemic wore on. I actually like got the job, and I was like, it's my dream job, family. We're moving to New York, and so like moved. But yeah, we just kept hiring from all over the country, and so like technically the headquarters is in Jersey, in Fort Lee at our CEO's house. Yeah, so we don't really have a location, and at this point, it's sort of like, well, like, why do that? I would love it because I'm a gigantic extrovert and love people, but yeah, it just doesn't make sense for the studio at this point.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, back there.
I first wanted to clarify something about the AI conversation, because I think there was a lot of conflating between, like Natalie said, the machine learning and the Gen AI, where machine learning's been around for 15, 20 years, and Gen AI has been around for 6. And I think that there's a big difference in that, and like us in audio can leverage machine learning a lot, and Gen AI a lot less. And I think it's an important aspect of this conversation that people overlook and just call everything AI, like Natalie was saying, when
Thank
like
you.
there's a huge difference between machine learning and Gen AI. My question is sort of going back to this conversation about jobs and generalist versus specific. I think something that was missed from that conversation was the fact that, you know, when you apply to a job 20 years ago, 150 people would apply for the audio job, and now you'll get 15,000. And so how do you stick out in that horde of people if everyone's a generalist? So if no one has a specialization, if no one has, oh, I'm looking for a weapons person, let me find that weapons person who sticks out in the crowd, how do you stick out amongst the noise?
I'll just say one quick thing. Trying to reach out to them first directly, and however, like, either it's like LinkedIn, or if you're at a networking event and someone's there for that company, GDC, all of that, I'm going to let others add. But I thought that, like, reaching out, I noticed really sets you apart, because there's going to be a ton of people that will not.
Yeah, I echo that. Even my first job 20 years ago was actually because of the internet, not really because I stuck out by applying to a job. Before Twitter, before Facebook, before any of this stuff, there was the Gang audio forums. If you're familiar with Audio Gang, there was a forum, and I put my demo reel up on that forum for feedback. And I got a cold call from the audio director at Chicago, being like, hey, I saw your demo reel. Do you want to apply for this job? It's kind of an unusual story, but putting yourself out there and connecting with folks. And LinkedIn didn't exist either. It was Gamma Sutra back in the day, the job board, which doesn't exist anymore. Putting yourself out there, connecting with people is really the way you're going to stick out. Because skills, like, there's so many skillful people, honestly. Even if you're all fantastic at weapons, like, I want a great person to work with more than I care about that you're like 1% better at weapons than, you know, somebody else. And LinkedIn is a great way. Honestly, a lot more friendly people than you would imagine. Like, if there's a game you really love and you think the sound's really excellent, just reach out and say, hey, really thought the sound was really excellent on that. You know, I'm a student. Is there any advice? Like, a lot of folks are going to respond to you. I do. I respond to students almost daily, and younger folks in the industry, and just create relationships. to the point where I've hired people that way before. So it's kind of a great example. Like reaching out and being a good human is really important.
I think we're not saying that specialisms are bad. Like, I think, if you're really good at something, that's great. Like, pursue that thing.
Yeah, T-shirt.
Right.
A lot of wide, generalized, but really great at one thing. Like,
or
that's still
multiple
good.
things is, if you can. I mean, like, I think going back to, I worked on a lot of driving games, and driving audio is a pretty specialist thing. It's very technical. There's lots to consider. And so, if I'm going to hire someone who for doing vehicle stuff, somebody having done vehicle stuff before it's pretty important, right? And so we're not saying that specialisms aren't valuable. We're just saying that in this environment, having that broad understanding and being able to fit into teams in that kind of collaborative way is super important, and it's probably more important now than it used to be.
Yeah, I would also say, like, especially if you're early in your career, like, if I'm hiring a junior onto my team, I am not hiring them to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And so being really good at something is not really that important. What I'm hiring when I'm hiring a junior is I'm looking for somebody who is like curious and has a ton of upside, right? So you got to have chops, right? Like, you got to have a reel that like sounds good and sounds cool. But the most important thing is, like, are you going to be good to work with? Are you going to be able to grow and learn and like be curious? And like, are you going to be flexible? Because for oftentimes, like, in junior positions, it's like, well, this person's doing this, that person's doing that. Here's what's left. Junior person, I need you to do this. And so, like, it might be the case that, like, you're spending like half a dev cycle like digging through Foley sessions, and like your specialization isn't Foley, but like you're flexible and you can do it, right? And like you're jumping into an engine and you're like, you can like read, if you can like read blueprints or read code and sort of vaguely understand what's moving, how things are moving, that's like a huge thing as well. So like the ability to like learn and adapt is like way better than being really good at something, because like you're still early in your career. You're not yet, right? Like, you're gonna get better at everything.
Understanding how you hook in the audio is so valuable. I think the one thing I would say is, like, I've worked with a lot of teams with VFX, audio, and the rest of it, and the times where they have to rely on the programmer to do that part of their job is now kind of should be long gone, but it's still super important. Like, going back to that point of being able to know where all the parameters are and being able to kind of do those things. It doesn't kind of matter what kind of audio you're doing, it's still valuable, right? Even if it's music. I mean, I was saying earlier on today to someone that's like, I remember on the original X-Wing game when like an enemy, like a bunch of new enemies came in and they played the Imperial March. They they blended into the Imperial March and then came out again into the, like, music is dynamic as much as anything else. I think that those kind of general skills are super. It makes your job easier, if nothing else. It may not get you the job quicker, but those kind of things are just super, super needed. So yeah.
Yes, Katie.
You mentioned reels. I'm actually curious, as people in a hiring position, are there like big pros or cons that you see often come up in reels that you would like suggest to do or warn against?
Ooh. Really good question. Can you cover for me
I
for a
got
second?
this, yeah.
Thanks.
So being brutally honest with the quality of your reel is really important, especially as young designers or students. Oftentimes, junior designers tend to have their schoolwork projects as their reel. And 99% of the time, they're fine. They're not stellar. They're not great. There are things that you probably weren't super passionate about when you did it, but you did it because it was a project. Make your reel something you really think sounds awesome and you were really passionate about working on. My demo reel was not one of my school projects. It was a separate thing that I did because I wanted to do guns and spaceships and dialogue and ambience and explosions. So I did Killzone 2's trailer, like from way back when. It had all the things. It was very short, very manageable. It worked because it was impressive, because I spent a ton of time on it and it was something I cared about and thought was cool.
Yeah, that comes through.
Yeah. If it's just school projects and it's like 2D games with like 4 sounds in it, it's like I appreciate that that was a project, but it's not particularly impressive. And that's not to be insulting. It's just, you got to pick great material. And sometimes that means way less. Like, don't have 14 different projects in a 2-minute reel. Like, if there is 15,000 people applying, which I haven't seen quite that many, but even if it's 100 people applying, if I'm going to look at 100 demo reels, I don't have time to look through 2 minutes of a million different projects where like a sound was the thing you contributed. Pick one great thing or two great things that sound awesome, and be brutally honest. It has to sound awesome in comparison to things that sound awesome. So if there are games that you think sound awesome, compare yourself to those games. If you're redesigning things of a game that you think sounds awesome, make sure it is an A/B comparison that holds up. Because the worst thing you can do is have an A/B comparison and it sounds way worse. Because it's just an automatic, like, well, you didn't hit the bar that the people who made it made. So,
yeah. I will say this. It's going to differ from this very slightly. I love seeing stuff that people have shipped in Reels because it shows me that you know how to work together with other people. If you're doing redesigns, cinematic redesigns are okay. I would also love to see gameplay redesigns as well, because it means that you are thinking about, what you need for sound design in actual gameplay, not just in cinematics. Also, generally, I don't like it when people put music in their redesigns. It feels like somebody's hiding. And yeah, keep it super snappy. Like, try not to overstay your welcome. Also, take advantage of, there are tons of places to get real feedback. I don't know, is Kevin still doing Real Talk?
it's been a while.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the GDC talk is still up there somewhere though.
Yeah. But even so, I run an organization called Game Audio Diversity Alliance. We do like real reviews in there. And there are just lots of places, like lots of Discord communities where you can get feedback on your reels and just like edit down. There's a lot of like tips and tails that you can cut off of the footage that you think is important, but like actually not. You can like make a statement and get out of the way.
You could also reach out to people and say, hey, this is my current demo reel. What do you think?
Like people
And
in front
not
of you right
everyone
now.
will reply, but some people may, and you will get really valuable feedback from those folks.
And make relationships.
Exactly. And if you say, hey, I made those changes, then you're already building a relationship. Like, oh, you listened to feedback and you applied it. And, that's really fantastic, just as an example. But the other thing that's important to mention, and it's been Kevin's mentioned on Real Talk. If you don't know Real Talk, it's a Twitch show, Power Up Audio. Their back library is on Twitch. I think you can go watch it. You should. There's a lot of great information there. But making sure that like the thing you send as your demo reel is like really attention grabbing. If it attention grabs, have a website with more stuff. If you're really fantastic at implementation, that doesn't show well on a reel to grab attention. But if I'm now interested in you and want to know what more you can do, and you show me your great Foley system you built or your car engine system you built, like, oh, they can also do this, fantastic. Or in the case of music, yeah, I don't want it in your sound design demo reel, but if it's also a thing you can do, a separate page with your music on it is fantastic, actually. Because again, that starts to build that generalist sort of portfolio. But the thing that you send initially should be the most impressive thing of the thing that you really want to do most.
And making it succinct is so important. And I would say that also, especially for composers, if you're reaching out to an audio director, because audio directors get flooded with composer demos, just make it very specific in terms of what you want them to listen to. Don't send them to a page with 15 different tracks, because they have no idea where to start, and they only have about like maybe 30 seconds to give your demo a shot. So just be very specific about labeling stuff in what purpose it might serve. It can be helpful, but just be very kind of short about this. Listen to this one thing for 30 seconds, and that's the best way to kind of get someone's attention.
And one other quick note about composers is like, obviously, like get in touch with audio directors, but also understand that that audio directors, when they're looking for composers, there's like a very short window when like the store is open for choosing composers. And so most of the time when you reach out, it's not that time. But what you are doing is you are trying to get into the audio director's brain when it is that time. So yeah, like, I'm sorry, but most of the time you're not going to get an immediate hit just because like it's cyclical, right? It's project to project. But really the goal is to try to like get in that list of 5 to 10 composers that audio director is going to think of when they're starting up their next project and looking for someone to partner with.
Any questions from this side of the room since I wasn't turned around? Okay. Last question, yes.
This is kind of going back into more industry talk. I know we had a lot of audio stuff. But like when you're talking about kind of the swings of historically when games have been up and down, just viewing it like on a modern scale, I've seen like how economic instability has really contributed to that in like unexpected ways. Like, you know, even thinking through like COVID, yes, everybody was at home, had more time to play games, but like did not have the money that they needed, right? And there was still a boom. And like now, like literally amid all of the tariff situations, Nintendo just had like the biggest launch of any game system ever. So like, you know, what's the push and pull with that? And I guess specifically with software, right? Like people are assuming, I would think they're more choosy. So like how does that dynamic play out historically?
That's a huge question. Where to start with that one? I think at least from my perspective, the industry has got many threads to it. And so, like, for example, the Atari crash that we mentioned before, that didn't happen in Europe. That only happened in the US. Europe didn't have the same dynamic. And I think that the current situation with COVID, the reason why games boomed when people had time is because games are actually very money efficient for entertainment purposes, right? Like they're actually good value for money when it comes to those things, but they're indoors and they take a lot of time in those things. And so if everyone's suddenly outdoors again and then doing stuff and, you know, then COVID was terrible for theater and for other things, but it was obviously great for games. I think the current cycle we're in was more of a boom bust in terms of just the cost of everything was so high that it just wasn't sustainable, and there just isn't enough audience to cope with it. And even like, so Marathon just came out, and it's not a bad game like some of the other big live service games, but it's still going to struggle because the inertia of moving game is so high at that level that making that money back is hard. And so they've had issues. A lot of the games coming out now are what I would call COVID babies. They're things that got made during COVID when everyone was working from home and not knowing how to work from home. And a lot of creative decisions went really bad and things took a lot longer to make. And a lot of the games didn't come out at all. And so lots of companies, spend a lot of money on games that never came out and never made any money. So, I mean, those things are happening. In the meanwhile, the indie devs have just kind of, the tools are getting better. The access to the marketplaces like Steam and those things are getting easier. Steam is $100 to put your game on Steam. iOS is $100 to put your game on iOS. That is a pretty low bar compared to what it used to be in terms of getting into people's hands. So that's why you see that indie boom. So those are the kind of big trends that were happening. Is the big guns got too big for their boots. The small teams have better access to the marketplace. You're getting better games as a result. People are still playing them.
Anybody want to add to that? That about wraps it up. Any final words of optimism that you all want to share to the audience?
I tried to start out with some optimism.
You did. I
really
appreciate
do.
it.
I'm just going to reiterate what I said previously. Like, I think now more than ever, the ability for small teams to make high quality things is on the upswing.
Yeah.
We're talking about a pendulum. And that means don't wait. Don't wait for somebody to solve your job problem. Get together with people, build communities, start making stuff. Make it in the off times, make it in the in-between times. It doesn't need to come together quickly, but it's also like a great time to start cultivating audiences. It's easier than ever to get your stuff in front of people. And if you make something really compelling, you're going to start building an audience. And that can be YouTube, that can be Twitch, that can be any TikTok. You know, you can start developing your game and start putting stuff up on TikTok. There's a couple great folks that have done that already. I think Supergiant Games is really fantastic and transparent their development process. They are early access. They don't need to be anymore, but they still are.
Yeah.
And you can see from the early on of Hades 2, like if you jumped in early, you were playing gray box levels in some of that, and now it's come out and it's really wonderful. So, you know, don't necessarily wait. If AAA games are your dream, that's still going to be there. That's still an achievable thing, but I wouldn't wait for that to just drop in your lap. Start building things. You know, when I was younger, like the mod communities were the big way you kind of started building stuff, working on Half-Life mods, working on Quake mods. I still think that's the way to go. And Unreal is basically free to access. There's Unity, Godot now is really started coming up, and really building your own thing is easier than it's ever been, and it costs almost nothing. And so I would be excited about that. And that's something that having just been laid off, that's something that I'm excited about and I'm thinking a lot about. It's like, yeah, I would love to get back to a AAA studio, but also maybe it's time to think differently. Maybe it's time to pursue starting something new.
Yeah, I think the formula is, even though it's always times changing things up, and I think the formula is still the same as a creator and someone who's trying to get into the industry or is in the industry. You continue on with your craft, you learn, you grow. When I was studying computer animation, when I was in school, I was planning to get into animation either through games or through film. At that same time, down the street, all my classmates were like, we're all gonna go work at Digital Domain together. And around that same time, it shut down. And that was like an eye-opener to us about the kind of the unpredictability of the entertainment industries, really. And that didn't stop me. I didn't say, oh, I'm not studying this anymore. I was just like, no, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna graduate college in a year. It might change. And the thing is you just keep going. Things go up, they go down, and you want to be ready with your portfolio in hand, the skills that you grew with as an artist. And so when that upturn happens, you're prepared. You can bring in your portfolio, you can show off your art, you can collaborate with others who've also been doing the same and keeping their head down and working and pursuing their craft. And yeah, you're gonna end up making something amazing together, because this is fun, right? This is not. It is an interesting thing. I've said this before. Art is a service, but at the same time, it is one of those things that it brings. It really fuels the soul, and not just you, but others who are witnessing it and experiencing it. So just keep that in mind, and just keep creating.
Thank you.
I think that nails it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to
Okay. Very well said. So yeah, big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you very much to YouTooCanWoo, Leah, Zach, Rob, everybody here. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for coming out and supporting NYCGA and being here.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Woo.